So whether you're a seasoned athlete or just a new runner, you've probably heard of dozens of different apps that are on your phone. You've probably heard of different apps such as Nike Pro Running, Garmin Connect, RunKeeper, Under Armour, Adidas, and probably tons of others as well. But there's that one app that always keeps popping up in your feed. At least it did for me. And that is none other than the big daddy, Strava. And oh boy, you have a lot of controversy on this one app. For example, you got the 5-star people on their side saying, best active lifestyle app. Been using Strava 2+ years. Truly positive social media. Game changer. And nice. And then you got people on the 1-star side saying bold claims such as, app is garbage, do not subscribe, useless, inaccurate GPS tracking, and why is it so difficult? Now that it's 2023 and Strava's been around since 2009, is this still really worth the have? Well, in this video, we're gonna go into everything regarding the data you could track, the social aspects of Strava, and the activities you can record. So let's get right into it. If you guys don't know me, my name is Dalton and I am an avid runner and strength trainer that has been using Strava for about the past year now. And I just basically want to give my input to see if it'll help you guys out and if it's actually worth investing your time into using Strava. When you open up Strava for the first time, you're going to see 5 different pages. You're going to see the home page, the maps, the record button, the group section, and then also your profile page. So when you open up the home page, you're going to see mainly a huge feed of all the people that you follow, which is probably 0 at first because you haven't made any friends yet on Strava, but there will be sections such as like all your friends that do activities, the athletes, and then also social media influencers if you really want to know how to get jacked from their workouts. But they're probably not jacked because they're both runners and cyclists. So if you're a runner or cyclist, this app is for you. If you're not a runner or cyclist, well, it's still okay because there are a lot of different people I know that have used this app that aren't solely runners or cyclists. As you scroll through the up and down the page, there's probably a lot of things that you'll be able to see, such as you can give people quote unquote kudos, just tell them that they did a good job running a 12-minute mile compared to other people, as well as also being able to run a 5-minute mile in the same feed, as well as being able to comment on their page to give them some beautiful love, and then also sharing that activity with other people if you really want it. So when you go at the top of the bar, there's going to be a couple of different actions that you could do. On the top left, there's going to be a spot where all you could do is just press add post, and there's going to be 3 parts. There's going to be the photo part, which is basically you taking a photo, kind of like a regular Instagram story. And then there's going to be the manual post, where all you're basically doing is just writing your thoughts down, or you could just do more photos if you really want to. So it's a combination of Twitter and Instagram, but except you're not going to go viral because Strava does not care. And then there's going to be the last part, which is your manual activity, where you can actually put, therefore, manual activities on other things that you did not record. So if you ever miss an activity, you could put that information there, and Strava will actually keep it in your profile, which we'll get into later in the video. There is also the search bar on Strava, where this is actually kind of like Instagram's search bar when you decide to look up other people or certain posts, and you'll be able to search up certain contacts, people on Facebook, because Strava actually connects to Facebook so you can befriend people. Then there's also the QR code app, where, like, let's say if you're talking to someone on the street, and you somehow just get in a conversation on Strava, and then you say, oh yeah, I actually have a Strava account, and they're like, what? And then you can just pull out that code, and then they could scan it, and then boom, they could follow you. So those are the main parts on that. Then there is also the settings button, which you could do a bunch of different things. You could set up your beacon if you want to pay for the premium, because they're gonna make you do that a lot actually, and I'll get into that later in this video. And then you can have stuff such as the weather, if you want it on your activities, if you want them to accept your contacts. And then there's notifications, because social media app, yeah, basically you can get the notifications of other people that have liked your post or commented on your post. So for the second page that we have now, there is the maps page. And with the maps page, you will basically never run out of ideas of where to find a place to run or to do cycling, as Strava mainly caters to runners and cyclists. Even they say this. When you're on Strava on the map page, you're going to see a lot of different spots. You're going to see elevation, what types of runs you can go on, the difficulty of those runs, the distance of those runs. Same thing with cycling, the intensity, the distance, literally everything. And it will also cater to where you are on the map. So it will not just give you random places, it will give you those specific filters and settings in the area that you're in. So if you are, let's say, in LA, it's going to give you the spots in LA. Same thing if you're like in New York, or if you're in Texas, Washington, wherever you are, it's going to focus specifically on that location. So on Strava, there's going to be three main sections on the maps part. There's going to be the segments, which are just tiny little sections that you're able to see whenever you're going on the map. And this is like a little spot where people will compete on certain areas on a local leaderboard. And then there's also just a personal best on whichever you're doing. For example, if there's like a really tough hill, there you're going to be able to see your personal best every time you run on that hill, which honestly can be a little bit addicting because you want to get better and better every time, especially when you're competing against other people. And then the second one, which is the most common that you will probably use, is the routes section. For routes, I personally use this all the time on all of my runs because I want to figure out how long the distance I actually want to go. So for example, if I want to go like 13 miles, 15 miles or whatever, I can just click on that page and filter it, and then it will show me all the routes that are within my local area of where I can do these runs. If you don't like any of them, you can actually make some yourself. So you can create your own custom route and just start drawing with your finger or thumb, and it will start telling you how far the distance is of the run that you're planning to go on. But the one thing that I really don't like about it is, at least I haven't figured out another way, is when you mess up and you want to keep redoing it. And let's say you're going on a 13-mile long run, for example. And if you're going, let's say you're already like 6 miles in, but you want to change something on mile 2, you have to undo the entire thing just to make that one little tweak, which personally is really annoying. But once you do figure it out, you can actually go to the next part, and that is saving your routes. And this is where you could save your own routes, or you could save the routes of what other people had, so you just never forget what you wanted to do for your future runs. And this is beyond helpful if you just want to prepare for anything coming up in the future. For example, I prepare in marathon training right now, so I'm going to use this route thing for basically majority of my runs. And you can also look at this on 3D mode for all of these things, the segments, the routes, and the save routes of anything that you want. So that is super helpful. So under the 2D and 3D button on the map section, you can also change the way how the map actually looks. You can use the standard version, which is, truth be told, the most common one that anyone would really use. In my opinion, I've used that a lot. And then there's also the satellite feature, which if you want a more realistic look. And then there's also a hybrid if you want kind of like the best of both worlds, I guess. But realistically, I have only really used the standard ever since I've been using this part. And then for the second point under that, there is also a heat map where you can actually look at the most common runs if you really want to have that. I personally don't really look at this because it's not that important compared to what else Strava offers, but it's just a good to know if you really wanted to know later on. And then in case if you get lost, you can just press the crosshair point under so you can actually see where you are in case you lost your cursor, whichever location you're in. Now on the third part of Strava, we have the record activity button. If you don't use this record activity button, you basically can't use anything else on Strava because it all relies on this button. So when you start using Strava and start recording your activities, the two most common that it will cater to is runners and cyclists, which is totally fine. But you can use it for a bunch of other activities. You want to use Strava to track out your yoga workouts? Yeah, you can do that. You want to start tracking it for your elliptical sessions? Heck yeah, do that too. If you want to use this weird air bicycle thingy, then you can use that too. So it's very diverse on all the activities that you can choose to do, ranging from running, cycling, to snow sports, as well as water sports, or even like other types of sports like tennis or ping pong. It's very diverse on what it can do. When you start recording an activity, there's going to be a lot of things that you're going to have. So for example, if you start running, there's going to be a map and then a bunch of metrics that you can actually use while you're on your runs. And this is very helpful in, let's say, like you want to run and you need to see your route, be able to show that for you so you can prepare mentally or physically ahead of time of where you're going. On top of that, it'll show you your current pace, and then it'll show you your distance, your time, and a bunch of other things as well. But certain things will cater to certain sports. So for example, it's not going to show you your pace when you're doing strength training. It doesn't make sense to do that. Same thing with other types of sports. I don't know, tennis. But Strava does cater a little bit to everything. It's mainly things such as like heart rate and time. Also on the app, which is super helpful, is that you can connect it to Spotify if you really wanted to make sure if you still want to have your music. This is mainly for running, but I'm assuming that you can also do this for other stuff if you really wanted to. But truth be told, you don't really need to have this. You could still connect it, just regular old-fashioned Bluetooth with your headphones, so it's not really too big of a deal. And I've never really used it that often, if ever, actually, because I personally just don't really care for it.
Hey guys, this is me from the future. Just wanted to say, if you're getting any value out of this video, make sure that you guys subscribe down below. It means the world to me. Only takes a second, and appreciate it, guys. Now back to the video.
Now there are other things that you could do before you record an activity. You can send a thing out such as the beacon text, and for most of the stuff, for example, let's say if you're on a run and you want to make sure that other people know where you are, you can send that beacon text out to those people, and then they'll be able to see what you're doing in real time when the activity is going. So this is personally really helpful for me because even though I do run, I also like trail running and hiking a lot. So if I'm in the hills and I don't really know where I'm going, it's helpful to know that other people will see me get lost at the same time. But it's mainly a great SOS thing that I actually do enjoy using on Strava. Now, there are other things that you could do before you record an activity. Before you even start an activity, you can actually connect to different devices which Strava can upload to and sync its data with. So for example, if you have a heart rate monitor or a smartwatch, such as something from like Garmin or Polar or Apple or Fitbit, you can actually connect it all to Strava and it will auto recognize it when you go on your workouts, and after it will keep the data from your watch or from your chest strap, and then you'll be able to see all the data after the fact. One thing I don't like about this though is, let's say you're using Garmin's app, and because you're using Garmin, your data is first going to go through Garmin and then it's going to go through Strava. The thing that sucks though is, let's say if you want to edit an activity, you have to edit on Strava and it doesn't auto sync with all of your other information on, let's say, your Garmin or your Fitbit or whatever you use. So you have to keep going back and forth manually to change the settings. If you don't really use those other apps, that's fine. You don't have to worry about this. But for me, I use the other apps as well because I'm mainly using that as a source of data as well as Strava. So it gets really annoying to try to manually switch all the data points to see what's actually accurate. Once you're done recording an activity, you'll then start to be able to put different parts of it in, such as like how hard was the run, photos and pictures of what you did on your runs, and also gear that you actually used on your runs or cycling, which is what we'll get into later in this video. Okay, now that you finished recording an activity on Strava, the one thing that is super important after that Strava does really well at this is the performance analytics. And for the analytics, what it is that it tracks all the things that you did throughout your workout, and it will give it to you in a nice dashboard from top to bottom of the various things that it tracks for that activity. So for example, if you're running, you're gonna see things such as like your heart rate zones, the actual pace that you did, the split times, and then possible goal paces if you're planning on doing that. And then there's also, for cycling, you're gonna have your power and your speed. So those are the most useful things when it comes to the Strava analytics. The one thing I would say though is when you do something that's not very common in Strava, or something that Strava doesn't really focus on, even something as common as strength training, it's not really gonna give you a lot of data aside from just calories burned, what you did, as in duration, and then also maybe something like elevation or heart rate, which, truth be told, it's not really as helpful or really needed at all, because you're probably not going to be thinking of your heart rate when doing strength training or something else like rock climbing. But all in all, it is some just decent data to have once you start using this more often. Now that you record your activities and now can see the analytics of them, the next part of Strava, which has 3 different sections yet again, which is called groups. And for those 3 sections, they are called active, challenges, and clubs. And if you notice, Strava likes the pattern of 3. But for Strava, they have the active section where you get to see all of your current active challenges and clubs that you are currently partaking in. And then for the challenges, you're also going to see all of the challenges that you are either doing or that you really want to get into. So you could filter this based off of things such as swimming, running, cycling, or just general workouts that could be something you're interested in. And then there's also clubs, which you can, in a sense, if you don't want to follow people, but if you want to join a club for something that you're really into, like let's say hiking, you can find that on Strava, and then you could possibly connect with people that are within your area, or even people across the world, which is honestly, it's really good seeing other people do what you really want to do, because in a sense, that's what Strava is meant for, is like that motivation factor. But if you personally don't need the motivation, then this section might not partake to you. But hey, Strava has something for everybody though. While I do like this section for groups, honestly, I think for groups, it's only really good if you really are a social person on social media. Because, you know, there's some people on social media that solely use it just to like people's posts, and then there's other people that actually interact with other people on social media. So if you're not really using social media for actually socializing with people, then this section might not really be for you, unless if you really like something like challenges. Then if you want to do that, whether that's by yourself with other people, then you might love that. It really comes down to what your preferences are of how you use social media apps. You could make challenges if you want to. I personally just did it for something as simple as walking. But in reality, if you're already an active person, I don't know how much this would really influence you on the challenges at all. Maybe something else like the goals that I'm going to mention soon, but we'll get into that right now. So for the last part, we have your profile page. And this is basically where everything for your performance analytics will be amplified into a giant dashboard on Strava. So you'll be able to see a multitude of different things, such as like your weekly mileage, depending on your activities. You'll be able to see the goals that you set for yourself, however that may be. There's a lot of different goals that you could set. For me, I use the mileage, so I can have at least a bar of how much I want to run. There's also other things such as like your exertion, because after on your activities, when you choose how hard the activity is, it will then go into Strava, and then it will start analyzing your progress and seeing how hard you're actually working yourself. If you're using something external like a Garmin or a heart chest strap, it's going to sync with that instead, and then Garmin will analyze, okay, this is how hard you're working on your workouts. Personally, this is one of my favorite sections on Strava, because this is where all the data really matters when you're wanting to improve in your specific sport as an athlete. Because for me, for example, I mainly use running in Strava. So as I'm looking at my weekly mileage, I know how much I can actually increase or decrease if I'm doing like a deload phase or something else. For example, you could do this for cycling or for swimming or for rock climbing to see how long you've been working out in those certain activities. After that, they have a monthly recap section of general data that you've been giving it. So it'll tell you, hey, this is the overall percentage of how long you've been running or how long you've been cycling or whatever other activity that you're doing. And it'll give you such as your PRs, as well as your actual total activity spent on anything actually. I think this is just really cool because you get to see at the end of your month how hard you're really working. They also have a training log to show you certain activities that you've done on certain days, which is super helpful for me because on my runs, I get to see how hard I was going on the runs and the distance as well as my pace. So I can actually plan anything I want to, which is very helpful. And then there is also other parts on Strava, such as your best efforts, as well as your monthly fitness, which is just an overall trend of what I've been talking about as of now. They also have a specific section on the profile page where you actually get to see all of your stats in detail. So yes, there is the performance analytics, analytics, but then you can also see just the raw numbers of how many miles you've ran, what's your best time on your 5K, what's the longest duration you've done in an activity, and a plethora more. Strava also has a very unique section which tracks all of the gear that you use as either a runner or a cyclist. And I love this because I'm able to actually know when it's actually a good time to change my shoes. Or personally, I don't do cycling, so you guys would know what's a good time to change, whatever, or just have some data on it. For me, like, I use my Saucony Tempuses. These have been my go-to running shoe. I'm not saying you should get Sauconys or anything. This is just what I've used personally, as well as my Salomon Speed Cross when I go on trail runs. So knowing the actual duration and distance of how long I've been using these shoes and when I actually need to change them out is a very good to know in case if you don't really track this on a different sheet or just in general, because sometimes when you overuse your shoes, you just might actually be damaging your feet in the long term. Now that I've told you basically everything about Strava, there's one caveat to this entire app, and it might annoy the hell out of you, because it did for me. You need to pay for all of this. Almost everything I've mentioned on Strava, about 90% of it you have to pay for. You need to pay for the heat map, you need to pay for the routes, you need to pay for the data analytics. You basically need to pay for everything that you think is important for this app. You probably need to pay for it, which most people would be turned off by this, and that is totally understandable. If you also decide to invest into an actual watch, for example, I decided to invest in Garmin, but I also started using their own app for all things related to running and just activities in general, and they give as much as Strava and then some, and then also better. So if you are planning on investing into more than just an app and actually into a watch, whether that's Garmin or any other activity smartwatch, I would recommend going with the watch instead of going with Strava. So who is Strava actually for then? For me, I would say if you don't plan on investing into more high-tech gear, such as like a Garmin or a Coros or any other type of smartwatch, then Strava would really make the most sense. Or if you have one of these watches and they don't have an app catered to it, or at least doesn't give much. For example, I used to use Fitbit, but I got more data from Strava than I actually did Fitbit. So that could be an exception of why you would go for Strava. Or if you also just want to have that social aspect and really connect with more people, because Strava does that really well, then I would recommend going into that. And at the time of this video, I paid for about $79.99 for a whole year. And for that, I would say that's a little bit on the upper end of an actual subscription for just an app like this. But then again, this is all relative to what you think is within your budget. So I would go off that first. So if you don't want to invest into the high-tech gear on a smartwatch, you can totally use this app and it will definitely help you on your running journey. But if you do want to go more in depth on different types of apps, such as Garmin, I'm actually going to make a video in the future about this in depth, just like this. So if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure that you subscribe and I will see you later. All right, take care, guys.